Hey, Jay Carper here from American Torah, and I want to read to you from Proverbs chapter 24, verses 1 through 6. Do not be envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them, for their heart devises violence, and their lips talk of troublemaking. Through wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. A wise man is strong, yes, a man of knowledge increases strength. For by wise counsel you will wage your own war, and in a multitude of counselors there is safety. Now, I want to describe to you some historical examples of the principles that this proverb is describing, and then I want to talk about the morals that we can derive from these examples. Now, the British Empire, it grew over the course of about 350 years to cover more than a quarter of the Earth's surface. Probably the largest empire that has ever existed. You've heard the saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. And that was true. United Kingdom, Canada, large portions of Africa, India and Pakistan at one time, many of the East Indies, Australia, New Zealand, parts of the Caribbean and South America. The British Empire was enormous, and it lasted for many centuries. And it still has a lot of influence today. It's no longer the empire so much as it's now called the Commonwealth, sometimes called the British Commonwealth, but I think it has another official name, Commonwealth of Independent States or something like that. Also the name that the former Soviet Union adopted for a while. And the United Kingdom, which is the core of the Commonwealth, still has far more influence today than a country of its size and population ought to have, all else being equal. Another example from history, the Third Reich. Contrary to what the British did, the Third Reich expanded over the course of about 7 years, conquered most of Europe, and then was defeated and crushed, totally destroyed. Rome and Greece offer a similar contrast. Rome grew from the roots of the Republic in central Italy to conquer the entire peninsula, and then to expand outside the peninsula, then into Asia and then Africa, in all of Europe, most of Europe, or all of Western Europe anyways. Rome expanded over centuries. Now, the Greek Empire, Rome, just like the British Empire, took centuries to fade away. And the remnants are still there today. And it had a huge impact on our culture. The Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, he expanded just like the Third Reich. It took him a little bit longer, but he swept across Asia and into Africa. He conquered, and then he died, and his empire collapsed, fell apart. The historical difference between these various empires is, the British Empire, it expanded almost incidentally. It wasn't accidentally, but it expanded as a side effect of trade and diplomacy, sometimes war. The British Empire rarely expanded just through raw conquest. That wasn't the way that they did things. They took it slow. They consolidated their power. They allowed a lot of self-rule eventually, to differing degrees in different places. But eventually they allowed so much self-rule that the empire just slowly became the Commonwealth. And now most people don't know that India is still kind of part of the British Empire. They're not ruled in the same way, but they're still part of the same organization that the British Empire became. Rome did the same kind of thing, although it didn't just use trade and diplomacy. Rome conquered, but they didn't conquer everything all at once. Their goal wasn't to conquer the world as fast as possible. They would add territories and then consolidate. They allowed a lot of autonomy and self-rule among their vassal states. And they expanded over many centuries. and then faded away over many centuries. The Nazis and the Greeks, the Nazis were all about conquest. They wanted to destroy what was there and replace it with their own. The Greeks, glory and conquest. It was all about Alexander and his goal to become greater than anyone else. Now, the real difference, and especially how this can apply in your own life, is the difference between a slave and a master. The Nazis, Hitler, the Greeks with Alexander the Great, despite their power in their military conquests, they were slaves. And I don't mean that they were slaves to their government. Alexander was a slave. Hitler was a slave. They were a slave to their own unchecked emotions. If your goals in life, your conquests, are driven by your appetites, by your passions, then really it's your passions that are ruling you, not the other way around. Your passions, your emotions, they really want to be indulged, and they want to take over, and they don't care about you. It's almost as if they are a completely different person from you. And if you allow your emotions to make your decisions for you, they will rule you. They will be your master. On the other hand, self-discipline, which was a hallmark of both the Roman and the Greek empires, was the self-discipline of their conquerors, not necessarily their rulers always. Especially with Rome, they had some emotional roller coasters for emperors. But if self-discipline, if your conquest is characterized by self-discipline, if you are measured in how you advance and grow, you have time to consolidate, and you have time to make what you have conquered really yours. You are using your emotions as tools. They're good things. Anger, rage, love, joy, these are all great things that God has built into us if they are used properly. If they are your motivations for acting, they will enslave you. If you use them to help you accomplish your goals, then you become the master rather than the slave. Let me read to you from Deuteronomy, and there is an example of this principle that fits right along with the British, Roman, Third Reich, the Greek empires. When God was telling, in this case, I think this was in Moses' final long sermon, he was telling the Hebrews how they were to conquer the promised land. This is in Deuteronomy 7:22-23. And Yahweh your God will drive out those nations before you, little by little. You will be unable to destroy them at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. But Yahweh your God will deliver them over to you and will inflict defeat upon them until they are destroyed. Now, when you see a powerful enemy or a goal that seems impossible, if you see an opportunity to take it quickly, to conquer everything you want, if you rush, it's not always a good idea just because you think you can, and you might be afraid that if you don't take it all now, you might lose the chance. But if your goals honor God, if these are things that align with God's will for your life, He will allow you to continue. He will fight your battles for you if you're trusting in Him. He didn't want the Israelites to just rush into the promised land and sweep all their enemies before them and conquer the entire thing at once. He wanted them to move in, conquer a bit, consolidate their power there, move forward, conquer some more land, consolidate their power there. And one of the advantages this gave them is the Canaanites were always in fear of Israel and Israel's God. But to an extent, it let them be passive. It let them think, oh, they've come this far, now they're going to stop, we can relax. Now, anybody who really thought it through knew that that wasn't true, but when people are ruled by their emotions, they make bad decisions. So God kept them afraid and also kept them from consolidating too much and uniting against Israel. And Deuteronomy 7, Moses talked about lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. Now, on the surface, he was talking about animals that if the people of Israel weren't numerous enough to actually cultivate the land and control it, then the forest would regrow, wild animals would move in. But underneath, he's also talking about the Canaanites. If Israel moved too fast, they might be enraged and they might be motivated by their own emotions to fight back and cause even more problems or even unite against Israel. Now, of course, God was always in charge and God was always going to allow Israel to win so long as Israel was honoring him. But that doesn't mean we need to make it harder for ourselves than we need to. So, there is always a time and a place. Not always. There is a time and a place for violence and warfare. These are not bad things in and of themselves. But just like emotions, they are tools to be used at the right time for the right purposes. If you allow yourself to resort to violence first, before you have thought things through and found other means, you are likely to lose what you've gained through violence. If not today, then down the road. If you gain things through wisdom, through planning, strategy, diplomacy, then you are likely to hold on to it much longer. And the things that you possess won't end up possessing you. That you will remain the master as long as you are remained a servant to God. This is Jay Carper from American Torah. Be blessed.